but I think Zappa was able to incorporate the 5 bodies, not the 5, but multiple bodies, in his concepts as early as the late 60s with the robots in Captain Beefheart Meets the Grunt People. So I found this section in a book called Body Drift by Arthur Croker. Came out in 2012. And I was looking at his opening couple of pages, and I think it is a pretty good description of what my 5 bodies are about. So I wanted to read it into the record. But before I do that, yes, we'll do that. I forgot. I want to read what Bob Marshall and I said to Frank in discussing Pauline Oliveros' work. So I want to read, this is an interview done in October 21st, 22nd, 1988. And so Bob and I bring up the idea. And we say to Frank, I'm asking him about the idea part of his work. And I go, where I get the idea part is, I remember you did an interview in the LA Free Press in the summer of '69, and you mentioned Pauline Oliveros' work with sound, above the audible and below, creating a mass. And you liked that idea. Frank says, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some difference tone which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yielded something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you like what you hear in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant, meaning Pauline's concept. So Bob Marshall says, yeah, because it showed you how physical reality is, or the way it is, right? And Frank says, it's one aspect of it. Then Bob says, are there other aspects you could talk about? Frank says, if you buy the idea that the vibrational rates translate into matter, and then if you understand the concept of vibrational rates above perception and below perception combining to create a reality, that opens up the door to some pretty science fiction matter possibilities. If you can create an audible reality by a sine wave above the range of what your ear can hear and another one from below, and you put them together and suddenly it creates something that your ear can detect, is it not possible that solid matter of an unknown origin could manifest periodically because of frequencies of some unknown nature above and below which, for short durations, manifest solid objects? It could explain a lot of strange things that people see. Then Bob Marshall says, UFOs come to mind immediately. And Zappa says, yeah. Then Bob says, there's much in the theosophical literature, in the mystical literature, and the mediumistic literature that says that's the way reality is. And they hoik that up as an explanation. But science traditionally doesn't buy that. So Frank says, I don't approach any of this stuff from a mystical standpoint. I'm not a mumbo-jumbo guy. I think that there are physical realities, and most of them are not understood. So that would agree with Pauline. Part of the reason why science moves so slow is because many of the people who do science and who receive grants have to be conservative individuals, conservative in quotes, in order to receive the money to do the research. And people who can convince a foundation or a funding source that they are conservative enough not to squander the money are not really the best guys or gals to do science. Give me some Teslas. Bring out some Teslas here. Give me some maniacs. Let's just try it and see what happens. That's the way you're going to get stuff to happen. The other criteria by which people are funded is whether or not the end result of the research will yield something that explodes or kills. If you can convince a funding organization that you have a new way to kill, and you are conservative and won't squander the money, you can be in the science business. So then Bob Marshall says, so much of what you say is common sense and what people have said a lot, maybe through history. But since World War II, there have been a lot of books written and movements come up, and nobody seems to have the staying power to apply it in a practical way. They get lost in the ideal of, quote, this is the way it should be, unquote, and then fumble when given the opportunity, or don't even know the odds they're up against. So Frank responds, well, another thing you have to remember about all science and all art, it is impossible if you're starving to death. Society has to reach a point where you can be self-sustaining to the point where your basic physical needs are taken care of so you can allow your brain to think about stuff like art and science. That's why artists and scientists have to keep their eye on the economy, because if things get tough, they can't do this shit anymore. And Bob Marshall says, scientists and artists? And Frank says, yeah. And then Bob says, so that's another warning. So just finish here. Because as the economy declines, Frank says, the willingness of people who control cash to spend for research on things other than stuff that kills. You know that LaRouche says the whole economy is built. It can only grow through research. So this is the opposite of LaRouche's answer to Riemannian economics. So Frank says, because as the economy declines, the willingness of people who control cash to spend for research on things other than stuff that kills basically has to kill you, or you're not going to get any money for it. For every cure for something, implied in it is, withholding the cure causes death. So basically, if you want to be a large-scale murderer, you can clean up. Occasionally, when times are good, they'll fund something else, by accident. Who knows how it happens? But when times are tough, those projects never get a buck, and actually research departments close down. You can't afford to run them anymore, so the only thing that's left is weapons. And once you build a weapon, what are you going to do? You got to use the weapon, and the thing has to have planned obsolescence so you can update the weapon. It's the spare parts contract that's really the thing that all these defense guys are interested in. Everything wears out. They're not going to run these new weapons in a test environment. They're going to be in the desert. Dirt will get in there. Got to sell them some more camshafts. Whatever it is, they're looking at long-range economic benefits from building a weapon. And in order to use something that kills people, you have to have a reason to kill people. A war. If not a war, a regional conflict. A small war. At very least, you have to single out somebody to be an enemy, and you have to direct your national interest to the destruction of the enemy. Now, we've been going along for years with communism, only it's not working so well anymore because the communists just did some jujitsu. They're becoming capitalists. Mm-hmm. And what the fuck is going to happen then? Who are we going to go after then? This is a big worry. And then Carolyn, who's there, says, Dr. Dean says, they're going to go after the public. Frank says, I think that is very true. The public. That is absolutely true. Look, this new drug law creates the position of drug czar, but the amendment to the drug law is this pornography bill. Did you know that? Bob Marshall says, no. Frank says, you didn't know that? Bob Marshall says, I haven't heard it. And Frank says, at the last minute, they attached this anti-pornography rider to the drug bill. This is to go after people that they claim have been long-time purveyors of obscene material. And what it provides is that, just as in the drug bill, if a guy has a yacht and he's using it to run cocaine, they can confiscate the yacht. Let's say you were in the record business and you had been a long-time purveyor of obscene material. They can confiscate all of your property. This goes back 20 years. It's a 20-year retroactive bill. Now, Frank had to be a bit concerned because he does a lot of sexual innuendo and swearing. And they could class his album as pornography.
Offensive.
Yeah, offensive. And I go, Bob Marshall says, when was that implemented? Frank says, yesterday. And I go, when was it discussed? You mean it was made a law yesterday? And Frank says, look, you know about the drug bill. They've been diddling with this thing for quite some time. But on one side, I actually saw the debate on C-SPAN. I think the thing was drafted by Strom Thurmond and rammed through by Orrin Hatch. They first tried to attach it to some child care bill. Bob Marshall says, this is earlier this year? Frank says, this is within the last month. Bob Marshall says, really? Frank says, yes. And Bob Marshall says, okay, I've been on vacation for this past month. I've missed this. And Frank says, Congress is trying to shut down. They all want to go home and campaign. This is in November. No, this is October 88, election year. And they're trying to crank out all this legislation. So yesterday, it was announced on CNN that they had attached this amendment to the drug bill in order not to have a mutiny by the conservatives in the Congress. So all the Democrats went along with it and allowed them to pass this. The drug bill is bad enough, but they've pasted this other thing onto it. So the drug bill allows for the creation of a drug czar. Can there be a porn obscenity czar coming up within a matter of moments if they actually make this law? And a porn czar. I think the whole thing is unconstitutional, but before you can take it to the Supreme Court for a test case, you know Reagan will sign this thing. It'll be on the books. They'll be out there enforcing it. And then there will be a test case that will go to the Supreme Court. Now, if they delay it long enough to go to the Supreme Court, they're going to have all right-wing judges on there. They're going to uphold the law. And what you will have at that point is the machinery that the Nazis would have loved to have had in place at the beginning of their career. This offers the legal right to stamp out any kind of intellectual activity because there's no legal definition of obscenity. You can't really nail it down. And any person can claim that something is obscene. They do that on YouTube. Didn't that happen to you? Somebody said, yep, spinning his wake's obscene. And YouTube called, Roxy, take that down. It's obscene. That's the Android meme. Here's another thing. Another thing Frank says. Here's another thing it allows for. Not only the confiscation of property, but it allows for prosecution of the person making it, the person shipping it, and the person receiving it. You don't even have to... That means us. You don't even have to buy it. If you've received it, you can be subject to this law. It is the most broadly written, nefarious piece of legislation I have ever heard. And Bob Marshall says, and it was made law yesterday, October 20th. And Frank says, I don't think it's been signed into law yet. I believe that they announced that the porno amendment was attached to the drug bill yesterday. I believe there's still some discussion, but I have no doubt that it stands a very good chance of getting through, partly because a lot of the people in the Congress have already gone home to campaign, and they're not even there to vote on it. And you know the conservatives are going to be there to vote on it because it's the fascist dream come true. So that's the end of that section of the Bob Marshall interview with Zappa. Now, Frank, 9 years before, had made an album where this musician, Joe, of Joe's Garage, is put in jail for making music. This is what Frank's developing here. He's showing how everybody's going to be made a criminal in some way by these connections over the bust of somebody doing porn. Everybody else gets implicated. It's actually busting the environment, the distributors, the manufacturers, the consumers. The whole medium is being arrested. That's a new idea. The Android meme is arresting other parts of itself, other environments.
Yes, because the Android meme tells you everything is now there for you to know and use, but then there are many restrictions that people may not be aware of, and they may be persecuted or
That's right.
punished because they sampled something or they did this pirate eBay or some type of common use place in the internet, and they are infringing in some copyrights. And
that's what Carolyn Guertin discusses in the book we're going through, Digital Prohibition. There's so many people getting arrested or charged, they didn't even know what they were violating. But see, Frank's talking in 1988, and Joe's Garage is almost 40 years ago. A lot has happened since 88. You have the creation of the 5 bodies. Now, this is where I want to bring in Arthur Croker and see if Frank anticipates this kind of sociology that we have today. Does he anticipate it in Civilization Phase 3? So,
I just want to add something to that actually the replay and the reuse of ideas and
recycling,
and memes has always been very important to progress, to develop new patterns. So when they're trying to control the sampling and the use of some part of something, it's really affecting the whole evolution of
creativity,
of the arts and ideas, and
That's why McLuhan went into analyzing the process of creativity. He saw that creativity itself gets you into a lot of rabbit holes, including becoming famous and then suffering the effects of that. What is your audience? Who is your audience? So, McLuhan analyzed the creative process itself rather than being creative. But of course, that was a creative response.
I think that's very important because, like you said, here comes everybody, and Pauline, one of her main goals is to make people aware that we're actually like a musical instrument. We generate sound and we resonate, and there is a lot of rhythm in our biology, and everybody should be able to participate in making music.
Yes.
She thinks it's something in our physicality. Like they found there are specific neurons in the brain that are only for music. So it's part of our neurons of our brain that we need this. we need music and to make it and to listen to it. And she wants people to have an expanded experience of what it is to really listen to music and to make music, to respond. And because she sees that besides the aesthetic and the joy, the fun, there are other aspects to sound that, like, for example, healing or...
There's political implications. You know, you got these college students in the United States, you know, all keen on Bernie Sanders, who advocates free education like you guys have in Europe, free, you know, no cost for university education. But this is because when everybody's engaging in the creative process and nobody knows what is ultimately art, Don Thiel wrote a whole book on this called Beyond the Word, about what is poetry and what is poetic, what's aesthetic, and what's valuable. And in the end, he's confronting the situation that everything has become poetic and aesthetic. That's another aspect of Here Comes Everybody. Here Comes Everybody as artists. So eventually a society that can't make old hierarchical distinctions between skills and consumers and producers are going to accept the guaranteed income. They're going to accept that everybody should be given a basic stipend and be able to go create from that. In other words, an extreme communism would be the effect of our digital environment right today. I mean, everybody's becoming one thing. What?
That's a thing I see Frank and Pauline have in common, that they saw audience participation is really important. It's not only a passive listening required.
Right.
It goes beyond, and it all has a media and ecological explanation. Why is audience participating? It's not just like they want to be cheerleaders and make you be part of the team. There are other reasons to this participation. It's like
well, it's a nervous response. You can't.
It can not be otherwise.
Right. McLuhan said the electric environment demands response. When the phone rings, you got to answer it. And we're talking about 50, 80 years ago when the phone came in. Now people have separated themselves from that demand. They can willy-nilly participate or not engage with all their recorded answering, voicemail, everything. We have an interesting new detachment that's happening, as well as extreme involvement. Both tactile, both are happening at the same time. So, what's the next idea? So then you got this huge participation, huge alienation, tactile. Nobody can get a central position. They can only get 11 listeners, a small audience. So you can't get the big deal. So then you can't make much money. And then so you're forced to be pissed off and creating. And they say, you know, one of the great joys of life is being an artist. Well, most artists today operate under incredible stress, just as everybody else does, in an environment which demands you make sense out of it. You participate, you create patterns. You get on there, read CNN, and then make your comments and do your insults. This communication, such extreme communication, which Baudrillard calls the ecstasy of communication, has flipped into no communication. No consequential effect. So in that situation, nobody can listen. So, you know, Pauline is bringing up the idea of deep listening in a world that can't and is not advisable to listen anymore. Here we find the flip point here. Bob makes a breakthrough. Miss Oliveros, unfortunately, we've pushed the deep listening so far that it's not wise to listen. You'll be drawn in. You'll end up voting for Trump or voting for Hillary because you listened. So you end up like the ancient mystics.
Ulysses.
Or Ulysses, right? You bind yourself to the mast. I'm just going to say that, right? So,
you encounter all the monsters in the media landscape.
Right,
like Trump.
Yeah. Or us. We're a media monster for some people. Iondom is a media. Ion's a media monster.
Yeah.
So, Roxana?
Yeah.
What's Roxana? That's the monster. What one is that?
No, Ion said I was going to become a monster.
Oh, yes, Roxana. That's right. Godzilla. Right. Now, here's what's interesting. It gets fragmented into 5 bodies. Now, this is where does Frank anticipate where we're at today? So, Arthur Croker in 2012 puts out a book, and the division for the book is put up at the University of Minnesota Press. It's called Post-Humanities 22. So the book is called Body Drift. It's an analysis of Judith Butler, Catherine Hales, and Donna Haraway. 3 women thinkers, 3 female thinkers that Arthur is going to look into. And the theme is body drift. And underneath Arthur Croker's name it says post-humanities. And the ITIES is dimmed out, so it's post-human ITs. Post-human ITs number 22. It's a series. And Croker's book is the 22nd book in the post-human series. Now, I'm going to read this couple pages, and I'm saying that this is a description of the interplay of the 5 bodies that I've laid out and that Ion says has merged. 5 bodies have merged. Let's see how well Croker describes the situation me and Ion are talking about. Been talking about for years, and granted, Croker was talking about body drift 20 years ago himself. Body drift. So, he says on page 1, body drift is everywhere in culture and society. Now, don't we say, I say that the 5-bodied model is applied to everywhere. So he's saying the same thing. Body drift or 5-bodied interaction is everywhere in culture and society. Though it was anticipated that the speed and intensity of technological change would effectively marginalize concern with the body, highlighting the digital rather than the corporeal, subordinating human flesh to data flesh, though it was anticipated that would happen, quite the opposite has occurred. Images of the corporeal body are the key visual language of contemporary politics. We may live in the shadow of an empire of cyber power with what the German theorist Peter Sloterdijk has described as, quote, terror from the air, unquote. But the messianic goals of, quote, total information warfare, unquote, are effectively stymied by bombs strapped to bodies of religious and political fighters, whether in the markets of Pakistan, the streets of Baghdad, the parched hills of Afghanistan, or the subways of Moscow. While the triumph of mass media, particularly television, may portend a future of pure simulation, the overriding cultural reality is that the image machine is itself haunted by memories of the body. Bodies of missing children, crime victims, bodies of those abused, violated, accidented, disappeared. While the privileged language of genomics might anticipate a future of delirious genetic engineering, the political reality today is that the future of genomics is itself challenged by religious concerns with the sanctity of the body. Of course, the rise of religious fundamentalism is itself challenged in turn by the new body politics of gays, lesbians, transsexuals, and transgendered persons. We are literally drifting through many different specular performances of the body. And I would say many bodies, but at this point he's saying, we are literally drifting through many different specular performances of the body, from the reactionary to the progressive. But for all that, all commonly transformational, all evoking the sign of the body as a fateful talisman of that which must be alternatively protected, forbidden, sheltered, transgressed, emancipated. Sounds like Berlin, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The culture of Berlin that you live with.
Wir sind das Volk.
Right. There is no longer, if there ever was, a single binding universal history of the body, nor is it possible to speak today of the body as a cohesive singularity. So I would call that the old chemical body, the Gutenberg body. He's saying it does not hold things together. That's true. Indeed, if so many issues related to body politics, I'll read that again. Indeed, if so many issues related to bodily politics can inflect public space and private time, it is because the very meaning, both surfaces and structure of the body, has begun to drift. So the meaning of the body has begun to drift. Body drift refers to the fact that we no longer inhabit a body in any meaningful. Do that again. A is italicized. Body drift refers to the fact that we no longer inhabit a body in any meaningful sense of the term, but rather occupy a multiplicity of bodies. You couldn't get better say than that. And then he has a hyphen.
There's where you got your ideas.
No, I got it before he did. But the point is...
No, I'm joking.
Yes, he's spelling it out. We both got it at the same time, late 80s. But he says, and that's because we're reading deeply listening to McLuhan. So, a multiplicity of bodies. Then there's a hyphen. He says, imaginary, sexualized, disciplined, gendered, laboring, technologically augmented bodies. So there's an inventory of the different kind of bodies. Imaginary, sexualized, disciplined, gendered, laboring, technologically augmented bodies. That's basically 5 categories there, maybe a 6th.
Yeah.
Then he says, moreover, the codes governing behavior across this multiplicity of bodies have no real stability, but are themselves in drift. So the codes are in drift. Random, fluctuating, changing. That's like a page of Finning's Wake. There are no longer fixed, unchallenged codes of governing sexuality, gender, class, or power, but only an evolving field of contestation, what McLuhan called dancing on the toes of the other guy, an evolving field of contesting among different interpretations and practices of different bodily codes. So yes, each body has a code. So reread that bit. Moreover, the codes governing behavior across this multiplicity of bodies have no real stability. So the codes don't have any stability, but are themselves in drift, random, fluctuating, changing. There are no longer fixed, unchallenged codes governing sexuality, gender, class, or power, but only an evolving field of contestation among different interpretations and practices of different bodily codes. The multiplicity of bodies that we are or are struggling to become, so you can't even tell when the 5 bodies started and when they will end. It's all drifting. The multiplicity of bodies that we are or are struggling to become is invested by code perspectives, never fixed and unchanging. Code perspectives are always subject to random fluctuations, always evolving, always intermediated by other objects, by other code perspectives. We know this is a matter of personal autobiography. For all the hype surrounding discussions of the extropium bodies of technological futurism, who has not had the experience of drifting within her own bodily history, selectively but no less intensely remembering past events, measuring past against present and future, drifting episodically, randomly, between the pull of social networking technologies and the always constraining push of individual autobiography? So that was a long question. Who has not had that experience? Body drift is how we circulate so effortlessly from one medium of communication to another. It is how we explore intimately and with incredible granularity of detail the multiplicity of bodies that we have become. It is how our bodies are inflected, intermediated, complicated. It is a double movement. That's like tactility, going in both directions at the same time. It is a double movement then. We drift within and across the multiplicity of our own bodily inflections. And the multiplicity of bodies that we have become, the who we are and what we would like to be, is itself caught up in a larger, more heterogeneous current of code drift. Indeed, to the question, what allows the body to be such a broad category of analysis and at the same time not to have any apparent coherence? So what allows the body to be such a broad category of analysis and at the same time not to have any apparent coherence? It might be responded that it is precisely the lack of coherence on the part of the body that is the essential constitutive condition for the specter or ghost of the body to continue to circulate as a phantasmagoric sign of putative unity. So he's saying that the reason there's one body, the flesh body, the afterimage of it is still dominant, because of the way of resolving this issue. It might be responded that it's precisely the lack of coherence on the part of the body that is the essential constitutive condition for the ghost of the body, the specter of the body, to continue to circulate as a phantasmagoric or after image sign of putative unity. In this case, the body can inflate as a universal sign of equivalence precisely to the extent that the actual meaning of the body has radically dispersed. So as its meaning has disappeared, it can be retrieved as incredibly universally meaningful. I think that's what he's saying there. In this case, the body can inflate as a universal sign of equivalence precisely to the extent that the actual meaning of the body has radically dispersed. Circuited by all the flows of power, talking about the body, circuited by all the flows of power, patterned by code works, shaped by norms of cultural intelligibility, an object of viral invasion, with its subjectivity increasingly taking the form of possessed individualism, the body can acquire such a powerful epistemological presence as a universal sign because the bodies that we are or would like to become are themselves increasingly dispersed, intermediated, unfinished, spliced, and straining. That's exactly what Ian said. 5 bodies are merged, spliced, and diced, and scattered to the winds. The answer is blowing in the wind. So then Coker continues. Are you still with me? Still hearing this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm having some ideas also.
Oh, shall I stop for a minute and hear some ideas?
Well, yes, because we were talking with Pauline how we are supposed to be the last generation of humans,
right?
The physical body. Now, the merging with the new types of interfaces and chips and technologies.
And surfaces. That's a popular word in postmodernism. Surfaces. Interacting with many surfaces.
Yes, it's not seen anymore as the new order is going to put a chip. Like many will be happy to be expanded. Like we mentioned, there is a guy who is colorblind and he has an interface that allows him to see color, to listen to color. So maybe there will be some types of interfaces that will allow us, for example, to listen to X-rays, ultraviolet, microwaves, or any other type of radiation, vibration.
Right.
Not only what we usually listen to, the sound in the air or the digital transform for speakers. So I was thinking how when the Sputnik went out and McLuhan says that erases the separation between first and second nature.
Yeah.
There is no more nature and artificial. That happened with us too. There is no more like the physical, biological body and the cyborg body, but we also expanded. Like Pauline says, we're already cyborgs.
Right. And I was going to say at that point in our dialogue
without all these technologies.
I was going to point out to her at that point when she said that McLuhan said we had gone cyborg by 1950. By 1950. And she's saying we're already cyborg, and a lot of people wouldn't have any problem with that. But McLuhan and Zappa said it a long time ago. So in some ways, the 5-body, the digitization and separation in the various surfaces of different bodies has a huge service. Bypasses the Orwellian and the Brave New World. But I think people are at a loss of how to talk about it. They need to learn how to talk about it with the Bob language and Ian language. It's the only language that gives you a breakthrough. I mean, this is pretty interesting stuff that Coker's reading or writing, and I'm reading, but you have to have a good handle on Bob knowledge to flow with this easily.
Yes, because for me, your median ecological explanations are the only ones that make full sense of what happened and what's going on.
Right.
It's not just like fragmentizing the history of art or...
It's not Freudian. It's not linguistic.
It's all.
It's not
you're
not capitalistic.
You're explaining in a new way. Why do we start to deep listen?
Yes. Why do we want to do that?
We have 5 bodies and then they all merge.
Yeah, Coker put out a tape at the end of the 80s. I remember where they were playing it at CKLN, and the headline on it was, "The ear, it must be destroyed. Pauline is a Noah's Ark of saving the ear. Retrieve the ear, save the ear, bring back the ear. Make it a profound religious experience."
Yes, I think it's a natural reaction because she's not only composing, she went to study ritual traditions and sound healing and many aspects of sound because like we were talking, these new environments make you feel a new frequency. I mean, we are listening to something else.
Yeah.
And it can be painful. It can be, I mean, it's even going to kill most of the people because they're not going to be able to digest listening to this new frequency.
Right. Yes, unfortunately, that's what's going to happen.
So she's in a way reacting to, like, trying to find a solution, how to solve the situation.
Yes. And here,
cyborgs lost in communications.
Yes, cyborgs is not as good a word as body drift. Multiple bodies. That's better than cyborg. That's too singular.
The body drifters. Yes, but this is just like a visual.
Yes, and Coker is saying the chemical bodies is retrieved with all kinds of meaning. So it's not totally lost. It may be just an after image of it. What?
The listening Pauline Oliveros is talking about is the tactile listening with your whole being, which includes first the other bodies and now the merging of these bodies, because she says deep listening is listening to all there is with all you have.
Right. And
with your skin, with your feet, and she has been doing these sonic meditations, which I find very interesting because it's a way of sound training, ear training, musical training, and it's very, we may say, therapeutical in a way.
Yes, therapeutic, but I think it's got a problem if it doesn't deal with the 5 ears, the 5 types of ear. You wouldn't listen for the chip body ear. You have to approach it some other way. Doesn't have.
Yes, but you, as a DJ, you have to recognize that there is some power in the joy one can get from music.
Yes. Oh no, I'm not knocking music. McLuhan said we live entirely by music. It's the only acceptable drug. McLuhan said music is drug enough for anybody, so you don't need to take these other drugs. Music will get you through the day and won't have so devastating health effects or insanity effects. Music is the best drug of the day, and everybody lives by it. Everybody lives by music now. But Ion is coming with a new kind of song where you may not have to listen to music every day. Just show up once a week. Get your hit from Bob.
You just have to listen to Best or Goodman.
Yes, that's a Goodman or Payday. So let me continue this, what Coker's saying. So he says, nothing is as imaginary as the material body. So we don't have a chemical body anymore. That obsolesces all the medical school's anatomy classes. And you have the afterimage of the material body, so that's sort of imaginary. So Coker says, nothing is as imaginary as the material body. Circulating fluid, borderless, with no certain boundaries or predetermined history. Isn't that interesting? Predetermined history is like Ion. We weren't born. No predetermined history. So much of Ion is responding to Croker, Zappa, McLuhan, these important writers. Ion has come up with a scenario that isn't limited to the spiritual. It's actually what's going on in the technological environment. No predetermined history. Nothing is as imaginary as a material body. Circulating, fluid, borderless, with no certain boundaries or predetermined history. The body has no meaning today other than its intermediations. No autobiography that does not possess its own hauntologies, haunting. And certainly no drift that does not leave a trace of its presence. It has no meaning other than its intermediations. No autobiography. Now, intermediations would be texting and people responding. You get your meaning by having contact, tactile interplay. Mm-hmm. No autobiography that does not possess its own death. And certainly no drift that does not leave a trace of its presence. There definitely are codes of gender that can be transgressed only at the price of punishment. But there are always gender drifters who remix, recombine, and resplice the codes of gender performance. There certainly is a disciplinary regime of sexuality, but there are also sex code drifters who make of their own sexual assignment an opportunity to transgress the codes, to refuse the normative, to live in Berlin, to overcome the predetermined. Against,
to be Paulino Oliveros.
Yes, to be Paulino. Against class inequities burned into, it's talking about class drifters. They're against class inequities burned into disciplined, laboring bodies. There are class drifters who make of their own protesting, rebelling, insurgent bodies a marker of the struggle for freedom. A marker of the struggle for freedom. I'll do that again. Against class inequities burned into disciplined, laboring bodies, there are class drifters who make of their own protesting, rebelling, insurgent bodies a marker of the struggle for freedom. While the age of specialization resulted in the definitive separation of the senses, body drift begins with a grand unification of the human sensorium. That's because it's an extension of tactility, which does the unification of the sensory, of the human sensorium. In genomics, new scientific theories focused on genetic drift. So, reading that again. In genomics, new scientific theories focused on genetic drift support an image of the body deeply influenced by random fluctuations, shaped by accidental events, and inflected by the vicissitudes of material history. Now, he's saying that in genomics, new scientific theories focused on genetic drift support an image of the body deeply influenced by random fluctuations. So, the theories around genetic drift. That's just the mixing of media, which has been going on through most of the 20th century. Support an image of the body deeply influenced by random fluctuations, shaped by accidental events, and inflected by the vicissitudes of material history. In the artistic imagination, representational depictions of the bounded body of modernist times, so talking about 100 years ago, in the artistic imagination, representational depictions of the bounded body of modernist times have been challenged by images of bodies circulating, crossing boundaries, in flux, with no definite purpose or certain direction. In cinema, body drift is the visual essence of power visualization of bodies of the future, with their complex intermediations of code, flesh, and desire. That would be that movie, The Fifth Element. That Ion refers to. Interpolated by ideology, addressed by power, circulating within the image vectors of mass media, mobilized within vast data archives, and at all times and places deeply inflected by questions of gender, sexuality, race, and class, the body today knows only drift in its mediated surfaces and deepest biological structures. Always circulating at the edge of codes old and new, knowing no certain boundaries, never simply a product of gender construction or essential identity, body drift is our real technological autobiography. You have anything you want to say? We can take a break again.
Well, I was thinking, for example, how new generations may identify more, for example, with an avatar.
Yes.
With their virtual persona than with their physical body, because they're more in the cyber reality than in this reality.
Well, you have the illusion or fact of freedom, of image consumption, of hearing, deep hearing all over the place. How can the body keep up with the sensory stimulation of the chip body? No way. So it either wears you out, you drop out and you start doing fa sol la, or you take cocaine and other drugs and keep up with it, or you take the RNA drops and enjoy the benefits thereof. Now, I just heard the phone click. Are you still there, Roxy?
Yeah.
Okay. It could conk out. So you wanted to add something to that?
Yes, I mean, it's hard to know how the millennials or younger generations are perceiving.
Well, they're at least quadrophenic.
We're talking about just this.
They're at least quadrophenic. You can explain to millennials, they may not listen, but I can explain to them their five-bodied, motioning toward hexad situation, which is Coker is spelling out here, describing the millennials.
Yes, because I was reading to an article that some of these medicines they give to the children that have this hyperactivity.
Yeah.
It's methadone. So they're really like getting from a very young age very strong medications and drugs. And what would you say? How would you explain that? Because
it means these kids are going to die a lot earlier, unless they're given a lot of prosthetics, because all these medications they take sap the magnesium out of them. This is what Carolyn's discovered. They're going to become incredibly magnesium deficient, which leads to all kinds of situations. Carolyn has several very successful people in their 20s. They're making millions, but they all got heart fibrillation or whatever it's called, AFB or something fibrillation. They got constant anxiety because they're on all kinds of weird drugs, and they're getting magnesium deficient. It's becoming like a plague because all these drugs feed off the magnesium. So we're talking kids dying early.
Yes, and this is the aspect I like, because we cannot. I mean, I found deep listening fascinating, and all the technologies Pauline Olivares is developing to allow people with, for example, hearing limitations or other types of limitations, impairments, to participate in music and listening. But we cannot specialize in just one aspect of, for example, perception.
That's true, but I would say that Iandom is saying, like Frank said, he was the best, he should be president of the United States. I'm saying that Iandom, that me and Carolyn and Ian should be the president of the United States. We actually are the one thing you should listen to.
Did listen to Bob.
Yeah, listen to Bob's guitar solo, sax solo, drum solo, synthesizer solo, and journalistic repartee. But no, really, Carolyn's now becoming the person with the key solution, with the key album, the key song, the top hit, makes Adele and them look like absolutely irresponsible, singing with their mouths, specializing
dance.
And dance. What's that? Can you dance?
The new dance.
The new dance. The new dance. These musicians, they get out there and sing their asses off, are making people fall back on their virtual ears and their virtual mouths and their virtual eyeballs and ignoring the multiple laser-beamed bodies that don't have and don't require mouths to sing. They just want to do silent texting, silent tapping, silent. They just want to do their typing. That's the new dance, this dancing fingers. Okay, I'm going to go back. If you finish your point, your brilliant point there.
Well, I was thinking also how Paulina Rivera's affected music and improvisation because she was making pieces in which she, for example, reacts to the environment real time. And she's saying you have to listen not only to patterns, ideas, conversation, but to the environment, which is also...
The environment is body drift. The environment is body drift. No, the five-body drift is the environment. That's what Croker's saying here. Opening sentence. Body drift is everywhere in culture and society. It's the ground. The interplay, the intermediation of the bodies is the ground, is the environment. And how do you listen to those different bodies?
How do you listen to all those different bodies?
That's right. So let's see what Croker says. He says the contemporary body politics focuses today with such elemental ferocity on highly contested attempts to freeze the circulation of bodies, codes, and histories. So I think I read that a little off. That contemporary body politics does all this. That contemporary body politics focuses today with such elemental ferocity on highly contested attempts to freeze the circulation of bodies, codes, and histories is probably motivated in large part by the actual objective presence of body drift as the animating energy of culture and society. That's saying that body drift is the ground. So this emphasis on the old body, to control it, to fight over it, is motivated by the fact that you don't know where you are. You don't know which body and how many bodies you have. So then he says, the political theorist Wendy Brown has evocatively described our current politics as powerfully marked by, quote, states of injury, unquote, namely by powerful psychological reaction formations generated by deep and lasting attachments to anger from any perceived attempts to cross sexual borders, imagine new genders, or remix bodily codes. Read that again. The political theorist Wendy Brown has evocatively described our current politics as powerfully marked by states of injury, namely by powerful psychological reaction formations generated by deep and lasting attachments to anger from any perceived attempts to cross sexual... So what are they saying? The anger generated by attachments to anger, these psychological reaction formations are generated by anger at or from or because of any perceived attempts to cross sexual borders. Imagine new genders or remixed bodily codes. The anger directed today against body drift is palpable, diffuse, and often violent. So, okay. The bodily politics of gays, lesbians, transgenders, and transsexuals. Stem cell research is targeted. Reproductive rights debates. Sometimes assuming the electoral form of Proposition 8 campaigns in California, aimed at preserving the rights of heterosexual normativity, at other times adopting restrictive measures aimed at marginalizing the sudden proliferation of countersexualities, seemingly in country after country marked by strikingly reactionary attempts to maintain the masculine as the universal signifier. Body drift is under attack. So if body drift is the figure and it's being attacked, we've moved to some other situation. We've moved to the ionic as ground. So body drift is the figure. So you have these states of injury that body drift is the target from. People are injured, so they lash out at. There's the anger directed today against body drift is palpable, diffuse, and often violent. It has, of course, its privileged targets: same-sex marriage, the bodily politics of gays, lesbians, transgenders, and transsexuals, stem cell research, reproductive rights debates. Sometimes assuming the electoral form of Proposition 8 campaigns in California, aimed at preserving the rights of heterosexual normativity, at other times adopting restrictive measures aimed at marginalizing the sudden proliferation of countersexualities, seemingly in country after country marked by strikingly reactionary attempts to maintain the masculine as the universal signifier. As a result of all that, body drift is under attack. And he says, and well, it might be both symptomatic sign and precondition of a fundamentally new way of understanding the body, so it's a sign and precondition. The ghost or specter of body drift is a very real threat to defenders of ideological purity. More than a panic response to the sudden... Now, he wrote this famous book, Panic Encyclopedia, back in '89. He's now implying that panic is a bit obsolete. More than a panic response to the sudden collapse of images of the body bound up with an idea fixe, or a fixed idea, from the normative regimes of religion... Read that better. More than a panic response to the sudden collapse of images of the body bound up with a fixed idea from the normative regimes of religion, politics, or gender, the circulation of imaginary bodies, that is the essence of body drift, provokes in its wake the most bitter of cultural backlash. After all, crashing boundaries open up new possibilities, but they also aggravate the most recidivist feelings, attitudes, and perspectives. But for all that, body drift cannot really be stopped. It is constituted by the blast of information culture, envisioned by artists, implicitly communicated by social networking technologies, signified by those ineffable signs of body drift. What are those signs? Tattoos, rings, and scarification. And live daily by remixing, resplicing, and redesigning codes of gender, sexuality, class, ideology, identity. But most of all, body drift has its key theorists, Judith Butler, N. Catherine Hales, and Donna Haraway, and definitely not Bob Dobbs, whose writings provide the vocabulary so desperately required to understand the contingencies, complexities, and intermediations of body drift. Well, I think we have moved past that, but that's not the immediate topic here.
But maybe here you could talk a little about your becoming a black woman and phenomenon of people.
30 years ago.
For example, there is not only transgender, but there's people that say, I identified with the black race, and I'm white, but I want to be black.
Right. Well, 30 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago, I read in McLuhan Land that you can't visualize tactility. But if you were forced to, it would have to be the color black, which is not a color, I guess. But black is the way...
All colors together.
Right. Black is the way you would visualize tactility. So they said, we're all extended tactility, so we're all blacks. And then... McLuhan pointed out that women were right hemisphere and men tended to be left hemisphere. And the Gutenberg galaxy favored left hemisphere, so men and patriarchy dominated for a good stretch of timing. But the electric age comes in and cancels out the dominance of the left hemisphere and retrieves at least the right hemisphere and maybe the corpus callosum, the part of the brain in between the two hemispheres. But since right hemisphere, feminine or female characteristics take over, then I knew I had to be we were all little girls. We were all women. So when I say I'm a black woman, it is actually what everybody is, and they don't know it. So I get to dominate the expertise of being a black woman. So
Yes, it's a metaphor of the drifting you're talking about.
No. Now, that's the black woman, which I 4 years ago and talked about on CKLN. With body drift, you're not limited to the chemical body of the black woman. You know, again, it is a multiple body situation. Are you getting an idea?
No, but I find it very interesting.
Okay. See, the black woman is the first attempt of early body drift. But when you got 5 bodies mixing with the hexatic, you can't use a body woman. You maybe be a what Zappa called a consumer amoeba. But now with Web 2.0, you can be a producer amoeba. Could you be an cephalopod or a pterodactyl? What would be an image of 5-body drift, knowing that the black woman is not prominent anymore? It's way more complex than the black woman. Probably being a snake would be the best image, because the way it weaves tactile, you know, the way its body goes in both directions as it wiggles along the ground or slides along the ground. I think the snake is the parallel worlding element. In other words, we're all Lucifer. Lucifer has taken over as the dominant image. Everybody's a slimy serpent slithering through what Ian calls slippage, interworld.
No, but I suppose he's also ascending, and before the fall he was the most perfect and the favorite and the most...
Right. We are going to bring back...
the most archangel of them all.
Yes. Could you say that again? The most what? Arcane?
Archangel.
Archangel, yes. So, but again, an image is not enough. We don't have an image of what we are anymore. That's what Coker's saying. No images have any staying power. So let's see if he says that.
But maybe it's also because of the obsolete Gutenberg galaxy. We needed before to have an image of everything.
Yeah.
And now it's another type of situation.
Now the image
There's
is...
going to be an image.
The image is the colonizer. But there's so many images, there's millions of colonizations going on, and counter responses and attacks back at the image. This is where Donald Trump becomes a major musician of our time. He is communicating quadrophonically, multi-imaged, snake-like, slithering into the White House, and everybody's just scared shitless. I think Donald Trump is the Charlie Parker, Duke Ellington, Elvis, Arthur Lee, Captain Beefheart, Bob Dobbs of the present collapse of the Android meme or collapse of body drift. Trump is the actual target.
I was thinking how, for example, Leonardo tried to make an image of the man in his time.
Yes.
He made this Vesuvian man.
Yes. That doesn't work anymore. Now, Ion recommends a kind of retrieve of the original archetype. Ion could be retrieving a stable image as shown in the biblical pictures of the throne, Sheila Kern's paintings of the ascended person on the throne. Ion did say that that's an archetype everybody goes through, all cultures, I guess, but that needs to be explored even more. But where does Frank come in here? What music is describing what we've been laying out the past half hour? It's his idea of digital dust. Dust, which actually is a very important word in the Ion's translation of the first. The what?
The fall.
The fall?
The dust.
The fall, yeah. Yes. But it's a key...
We fell because we ate the dust.
Right. It's a key image in Genesis, in what Ion calls Genesis. Garden of Eden, digital dust. So we need to know more about what Frank meant by that, what he was referring to. I'll have to look up the interview someday where he says it and just see how much he elaborates. In one of these guitar magazines, I think, in the early 90s, just before he died. They do a special article on him. It might be Guitar, then there was another magazine. But with that in mind, the slithery snake, let's see if Coker's last paragraph fits that. Okay, so the specter of body drift. So it's a ghost, like they used to say, the specter of communism. So body drift has become a figure of resentment, something to attack. So Trump is a quadrophenic snake that everybody's attacking. So he's certainly miming the quadrophenic situation for the five bodies. So what is this post-Android meme image? It's both symptomatic sign and precondition of a fundamental of ideological purity. More than a panic response to the sudden collapse of images of the body bound up with a fixed idea from the normative regimes, norm-making regimes of religion, politics, or gender, the circulation of imaginary snake-like bodies, that is the essence of body drift, provokes in its wake the most bitter of cultural backlash. The snake drifts. When you watch a snake moving along the ground, it's kind of drifting, right? It's just sliding along. After all, crashing boundaries open up new possibilities, but they also aggravate the most recidivist feelings, attitudes, and perspectives. But for all that, body drift cannot really be stopped. The snake can't be stopped. It is constituted by the blast, is made up of the blast of information culture, envisioned by artists, implicitly communicated by social networking technologies, signified by those ineffable signs of body drift, tattoos, rings, and scarification, and lived daily by remixing, resplicing, and redesigning codes of gender, sexuality, class, ideology, identity. This is what all these millennials are going through, constant upset of their gender, sexuality, class, ideology, and identity. But most of all, body drift has its key theorists, Judith Butler, Catherine Hales, Donna Haraway, and not Bob Dobbs, whose writings provide the vocabulary so desperately required to understand the contingencies, complexities, and intermediations of millennial body drift. Can we bring this?
Yes, I think a very important part of our health is to have the explanation. Like she says, it's desperately required.
Yes. You said health, right? The mind needs a reason. The mind screams for a reason. It's got to have a reason. So we're providing the reason. The model, the image, and that would give you poise. Yes, it's very key to health. So I'm trying to think of what songs did Frank write. Is there any song titles that could be fit into this body drift situation? His play Dio Fa tried to show multiple realities and environments interfacing. Maybe Dio Fa does that. So if you're listening to this, we will end this series, however thousands of hours is going to be. When we finally get to the end, you will hear me discuss Dio Fa, God Lies, with Ike Willis, and how Ike was amazed at this project that he hadn't fully been aware of. He only got glimpses of it that Frank had planned on and laid out in his book in 1989, the Dio Fa scenario. That's the clue.
You're going to do the Dio Fa Sola.
All right. Yeah. And what was I saying? The Dio Fa is... Yeah, so that's the closest to multi-modular environments. Are they particular bodies? That's another matter. So maybe so we're going to end with the series will feature My Dialogue with Ike Willis. And then Ike Willis and I discussing how Frank was murdered. He was attacked.
Frank says Diofa means like God makes, right?
No, God lies.
No?
He says it means God. Diofa, F-A, means lie. God lies.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh.
Hey, you explain a little bit. I got to go take a drink. You wax on eloquent.
No, maybe you could play something by Pauline. Just.
Okay.
Or did you already play the interview?
No. I didn't play the interview. Do you want me to play Listening Deeply or Deeply Listening? The music. It's 5 minutes.
No, but maybe you could play the first part of the interview. It's 15 minutes.
Okay. That's a good idea. All right, so let me find that.
You can.
Somebody named Roxanne sent it to me. Let me look for it. I've been getting many emails from Roxanne. Roxanne, here, part 2, part 1, first part right here. I think I've got everything open.
Should I hang up and then?
No.
Because
why?
It's 15 minutes. No.
No. Just you can lay your phone down and lay your phone down and walk around.
Oh, I can listen.
Yeah, and just put it on mute. Okay, so up comes a thing. I've got to make sure everything's open. That's open. So we haven't finished. We're just going to take a little example of.
Yes, maybe by listening, I can think of other ideas.
Right. Okay, so web control panel, that's done. Yeah, I think it's all ready to be played. All systems are on. Just a second. There it is. Okay, here we go.
We have half an hour approximately, Pauline.
Well, I have a short time.
Okay, so I just want to mention, I'm a good friend of Gerd Stern.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
He was there in '63 with you at the Tape Center. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's done this great oral biography at San Francisco University or something out there. They have this booklet, and he goes through everything, starting at Black Mountain College,
yes,
1950 or something.
Right.
He has an incredible history. He basically interacted with everybody.
Yeah.
What became the counterculture or different arts, even up to MIT.
Right.
And I've done a 24-hour interview with him. It was done over several months.
Oh,
I can send you the link if you'd like to hear. We go into we go into the detail of that long book, and plus things that he didn't talk about.
Right. I'm sure.
So I'll say hi to him for you.
Okay, please.
Yes. Well, one of the main discoveries of the century, the scientists say, is these gravitational waves that they were able to notice because they heard a C sound coming from the collision of two black holes.
Right.
And that made me think about you because you were always talking about how important it is to hear, to listen. And with the technologies, we're now starting to listen into the quantum, really, amplifying things that were not possible to hear, and black holes. And I think what you were saying, like you said, since a long time ago, is becoming more and more relevant now that sound is becoming also really important in the evolution of technologies, and they say this is going to change all physics, and they even think teleportation might be possible using sound, and how everything is frequency and everything is interacting, and that's something I gained from your work, this awareness of sound massaging like the molecules and the cells, and how everything is connected, and how we can hear maybe without being aware from our ears or our brain, but there is something in many levels in our body that is listening.
Yes, I believe that.
Yes, maybe you could tell us more about how you see your theories now in this situation.
Oh, well, I feel that it's more than ever important to continue to investigate what is listening. I mean, our ears are not listening; they are sensing, and they're gathering waveforms. But the waveforms are transmitted to the brain, and the brain is where listening takes place. Except that there is an important other aspect, which is vibration, and vibration of the skin, for example. So that we have much more opportunity to listen through vibration, as well as having waveforms transmitted to the brain. So we have to begin to understand listening as a whole body function, and to give attention to that, because we've been taken away from the body by focused activity concerning speech and mathematics or coding, so that this is the focus on a stream of information, but forgetting about the complete expansive nature of all interconnection. And so the interconnection of all things comes through whole body functioning and sensing.
There's one thing I also always find very interesting. You said you are making music, but not only music, also silence.
Oh, well, silence.
Silence that you can hear.
That's a problematical term.
Yeah.
Silence. Silence, if you have a definition of silence, it's zero vibrations. And if we had that, we wouldn't exist.
Yeah, it's not possible.
No. So it's an abstract concept. But we have relative silence, or relative quiet, I would say.
Or less stimulation.
So, I mean, we have to have... Huh?
Less stimulation.
Yes. But, I feel that it's important to recognize that there are different ways of understanding what that term means.
In Hot and Cool, the collection of McLuhan essays in 1967 by Gerald Stern, the very last question Stern asked McLuhan is, will there ever be silence? And McLuhan says, objects are unobservable. Only relationships among objects are observable. I always thought that was a good answer.
Yeah, that's a very good answer, I would say.
The acoustic is coming back. But it's not the acoustic as we used to think we hear only with the ear. It's the tactile, or the more synesthetic type of perception. Mm-hmm. And there are now some technologies, like they're developing these brain interfaces, and there is also like, there is a man, I forgot his name, but he has a type of interface because he's colorblind, and this allows him to listen to color.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sure.
remember that.
Yes. So, how do you see technologies expanding our hearing?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize all types of human being. And for example, in the fall, I had a seminar which was devoted to building instruments and interfaces for the deaf and hard of hearing, so that they could participate in musical activity. So this is a marginalized community. I mean, a community that has its own culture and definitions and so on. But it's important that we accept all. I mean, we have equal opportunity for people to participate in some kind of musical activity. So this is happening. And this was a very, very interesting seminar, because it's very interesting to think about making music if you can't hear in the usual way. So then it means that you have to find ways of synesthesia or for perceiving vibration, so that you can understand what is happening in some way. So I think that we can't just keep our definitions focused in certain ways. We have to open and expand and find new ways to work together.
So when you say whole body listening, I think that was your phrase, that includes or is limited to synesthesia?
No, it includes it. Yeah, for sure. It includes any way we can. Anything we can do. Anything we can do and anything that we haven't learned that we can do.
Did you have something to say, Roxy, to that?
Well, I found what you do very interesting, because it also gave me the awareness that we're immersed in like some type of music that never stops, and you interact with this sound landscape in real time. And for me that was like a big revelation, that because in a way, like McLuhan says, technologies has always been about expanding some of our senses, and this has been this odyssey of expanding ourselves. And I think already in our physicality we have a lot of possibilities, like we don't use the whole brain, or there is all this junk DNA, but I think there will be new technologies that are going to activate that. And the expansion is not necessarily going to be into this hybrid cyborg, because many said we are the last real humans. The next generations are going to be cyborgs. So,
yes.
What do you think about this?
We already are. Look at us.
Yeah.
I got my little earbuds on. You got your headphones. You got your big microphone there.
McLuhan said that the telegraph changed the newspaper. And he said because people were able to get information from all over the globe, he said that was retrieval of acoustic space. electrically. He used to say we hear from all directions. So socially, we now can get communication from around the world. So then he would say that the newspaper, the telegraph press, was acoustic space, an image of acoustic space. So he was starting to think synesthetically. He was mixing up the literalness of what is hearing with that statement. I thought that was pretty neat. People do not think they're experiencing hearing when they're looking at a newspaper page, but they're actually experiencing the visual effect of an acoustic simulation that happens with a telegraph. That I see that as a kind of mixture in pushing the definitions of acoustic space and other senses that came from Finnegan's Wake. Did you ever look at Finnegan's Wake, or did you ever think about Finnegan's Wake and what Joyce was trying to do?
Sure.
Were you aware of that, like in the 50s, as a young person?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
How did you become aware of it? Through your own experience or through your teachers? Do you remember how?
Not through teachers. I don't remember exactly how.
Maybe John Cage?
No. I really can't remember exactly how I came across Joyce, but I did. And I was interested in it because of his interest in sound.
Right. I used to ask McLuhan which came first, the ear or the eye, and he said, well, we're still working that out, but he would in his writing say that Finnegan's Wake shows the ear as the ground sense.
Well,
he would capitalize ear.
Well, I would say that the ear is the primary sense. It's the first to develop. And
what about touch? How does touch relate to, McLuhan called it audile tactile?
Yes.
Our present experience.
Yeah, so I think kinesthetic is there as well, because the ear, has also a lot to do with balance.
Proprioception.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I differentiate between hearing and listening.
Yes, I've heard you talk about that.
Right. And
so when you say what is listening, it's not like give me a definition of listening. The question means what in my being is listening.
Right, exactly.
It's like our whole being is listening, actually.
Sometimes, but not always.
But it could. Go ahead.
No, I mean, because it can be shut down. Listening can be shut down, but what comes into the ear is not shut down.
Okay, that was pretty good. Okay, Roxy, that was pretty good.
Yes.
That's the beginning, and there's another.
That's another video.
Right, let me stop that. Engon, oh, that's one you made, Engon. Well, that fits what I want to play. I've decided that Zappa's composition, N-Light, capital letter N and then hyphen and then L-I-T-E, may be applicable to the multi-body drift, because when you it comes on Civilization Phase 3, and it's 18 minutes long, and it's made up of 6 parts. The first part is called Negative Light. The second part...
But maybe before you go into that, I just want to make very short comments.
Okay.
The things I was listening to.
Go ahead.
That listening is still a mystery. There is no explanation, a real explanation of what's going on when we listen. Because as many have discovered, from Helmholtz, who did the first studies and tried to explain how we listen, it's a very, very complex process, and there is not only the physiological, there is many things affecting what you listen, how you listen, and it's still a big mystery. We don't know what is really going on. And it goes beyond the perception of vibration. It has to do with memory and culture and psychology and many other aspects. Then another thing is, she says, it's the first sense that we develop. And we start reacting to sound, I think, after 2 weeks as fetuses. Already this thing that is not even a fetus, something, it starts reacting to vibration, for example, to the voice of the mother or the sound of the heart.
Right.
There are some recordings, some videos of with micro cameras, and this thing that is not even human reacts, moves when there is some sound stimulation, and then it's the last sense that is turned off, because some people that came back from death, they recount that they could listen everything that was going on around them. That people were crying or whatever they were saying, like they got an operation and they thought he's dead, and they tried to say something but they can't. But it's very interesting how the listening, it has to do with our activation as gods or as humans. It's like Ian says, life starts when we breathe, but then maybe what we call recollective lucidity, the awareness, starts with sound. I'm not sure. But
isn't it sound in tandem with touch? Audile, tactile? What happened? Phone must have died. So what I want to play is N-Light, which is an 18-minute piece, and Zappa has 6 parts, and the first part is called Negative Light. So negative light, we in Eindom talk about negative pH, which we are creating. Then you have part 2, Venice Submerged. LaRouche does a lot on the Venetian oligarchy. And then 3, the New World Order. 4, the lifestyle you deserve. 5, creationism. And 6, he is risen. So N can mean multiple situations. So the multiple-bodied thing could be symbolized by the letter N. And light means, L-I-T-E means superficial, surface, like the beer, light beer. So you have these themes that I could interject the different bodies on. But I won't do that right now because Roxy's not here. I will go get her. But let's hear a bit of N-Light. I'm not sure if I'm going to play the whole thing, but that's what we're featuring right now. Boy, that was awesome. That was N-Light by Zappa. So what I need to do, I'll put on a little shorter thing while I get Roxana back on the line. Well, that never happened before. Frank Zappa's N-Light, followed by Paul Anka from a song 50 years ago, Put Your Head on My Shoulder. After your head got lopped off by listening to N-Light, you pick up your head and you put it on top of someone's shoulder. They carry it around for you. Now, listening to N-Light, which I've not listened to in 20 years, I was quite impressed with it in terms of the snake-like qualities of the shifting and moving of the body drift and the growling caveman voice in there. Early man.
When I was hearing that, I was thinking maybe the different languages come from the different types of blood for some reason. I don't know why.
The different what?
Languages
Oh, the different languages of love, did you say?
No, came from the different types of blood.
Oh,
why will different languages
I know why. That's a good point. The proprioceptive, when you're taking the RNA drops and talking to ion is almost like the voice of the autonomic, the proprioceptive, the movement along the bodily fluids of the nervous systems of our landscape, externally and internally. So you said you thought of the 5 types of blood. That's very good, because we're talking about movement, river run, on granular, subatomic, and macro levels. So it's snake-like. That's why I said snake. Matter of fact, McLuhan has on page 136 of From Cliched Archetype, a page I've quoted 1,000 times. The Thailanders, their sensory bias and sense of mastery is indicated by the phrase, I know it like a snake swimming in water. That's their sensory bias, a tactile bias. I know it like this. When they feel they are in the zone, they're in charge, or a mastery of something they're doing, they feel like a snake swimming in water. It's amazing. I just said snake, and then this comes up, and then you're proprioceptive. It all fits. Of course, it's already been happening. I'm only catching up to myself. I already said all this, right? It's just recognizing it. So, yeah, that's...
You're just replaying.
I'm replaying what I already said. There was a line in the Explorations Journal I mentioned earlier where McLuhan says, is anybody listening? He also has a statement, let me repeat what I was about to say. Let me repeat what I was about to say. That's what we're talking about here. That's multidimensional. Now, the slipping and sliding of the parts of N-light, then I'm thinking of N-gon, because Ion says we've moved out of the octet into the N-gon, letter N, and in mathematics that's like infinite, I guess, innumerable dimensions. Zappa is showing many dimensions in this piece, and he begins with negative light, which reminds me of, part 1's called negative light, reminds me of negative pH. And then Venice submerged is part 2. Venice, the symbol of oligarchic corruption that LaRouche has done a lot of history on. It's submerged. The oligarchy's gone. 3, the New World Order. Well, the New World Order is a fake operation to cover up the fact that it got submerged. 4, the lifestyle you deserve. That's nice. 5, creationism. That's making your own spaces. And 6, he is risen. Sort of a Christian theme. Now, how can we put the 5 or 6 bodies into this? The chemical body would be the New World Order. The astral body would be negative light.
May I ask you, why did you say that the chemical body is the New World Order?
I don't have to explain myself. I'm just making it up. I'm just creating a crock of shit. I'm just creating an instant pattern.
No, I think it's very interesting, but I would like to...
Okay, I can explain it. I'm just joking. I just want to insult you or do that funny tone. But no, the New World Order is the inevitable organization for the chemical body level of life. I mean, you got the digital attack on nations, you've got the ion attack on the blood, you got this total chaos going on. What will come out of it is a world government structure, not in politics but in actuality. The nomadic global population will drift around the planet, working here and there. They're dragging their chemical bodies where they go. So the dream of world government 100 years ago for the chemical body has been totally smashed and made not even significant. So it's not a threat to people's identity if you have a paranational, multi-shifting, multi-bordered employment service for the chemical body. So that's why the New World Order. The actual guys that were trying to